prison officer dropped his flashlight. It hit the concrete floor with a loud crack. For a moment, nobody moved.
I don't understand. How did he get out?
Nobody spoke. Nobody even breathed.
The door was supposed to be locked.
Cell 14 was locked. The steel door had not been opened all night. The security camera outside the cell showed the same thing for hours. No one had gone in.
Get back in your cells
now!
now!
No one had come out.
Open
and
the
yet
gates!
The prisoner
We want
inside
out!
was gone. Vanished. The bed was empty. The tiny sink stood untouched. The small barred window was too narrow for any person to fit through. The walls were solid concrete. The floor showed no sign of digging. The ceiling was untouched.
Keep moving!
The prisoner had
Line
simply
up against
disappeared.
the bus!
Officer
No talking,
Daniel
eyes
Brooks
forward.
stared into the empty cell. Just 6 hours earlier, he had looked through the small viewing slot and seen inmate Michael Turner sleeping on his bed. Now Michael Turner was nowhere to be found. A locked cell, a missing prisoner, and something else. Something that made Daniel's blood run cold. On the center of the bed was a single piece of paper. A note. 3 words were written on it. I warned you. Daniel slowly reached toward the paper. But before his fingers touched it, a loud alarm suddenly exploded through the prison. Red emergency lights began flashing across the hall. Every prisoner started shouting from inside their cells. And somewhere deep inside the prison, a scream echoed through the darkness. Nobody knew what had happened. Nobody knew where Michael Turner had gone. But one thing was certain. The nightmare was only beginning. 3 weeks earlier, Black Ridge Penitentiary sat alone in the middle of the desert. The prison was old. Very old. Its gray walls looked like they had been standing forever. Most people hated working there. The halls were dark. The lights flickered. The air always felt cold, even during summer. Officer Daniel Brooks had worked there for 8 years. He thought he had seen everything. Escapes. Fights. Smuggling. Lies. But he was wrong. The trouble started on a rainy Tuesday morning. A prison bus rolled through the front gate. Several new inmates stepped off. Among them was Michael Turner. At first glance, Michael looked ordinary. He was 38 years old. Average height. Short brown hair. Quiet voice. Nothing special. But rumors followed him everywhere. Some officers whispered that he had been involved in a large criminal operation years ago. Others said he knew secrets about powerful people outside prison. No one knew which stories were true. Michael rarely talked. He kept to himself. He spent most of his time reading books or staring at the wall. Yet strange things seemed to happen around him. Within days, prisoners began avoiding him. Whenever Michael entered a room, conversations stopped. When officers asked why, nobody gave a clear answer. It's just a feeling, one inmate said. Daniel thought it was nonsense. Until one evening. He was making his rounds when he noticed Michael standing inside his cell. The inmate was staring directly at the wall. Not moving. Not blinking. Just staring. Daniel stopped. What are you looking at? He asked. Michael slowly turned his head. Then he smiled. It was not a normal smile. It was calm. Too calm. The prison remembers, Michael said. Daniel frowned. What does that mean? Michael looked back at the wall. You'll find out. Daniel shook his head and walked away. But the words stayed with him. The prison remembers. Over the next week, stranger things happened. Security cameras malfunctioned. Doors opened seconds later than they should. Prison records disappeared from computer systems. Nobody could explain why. Then one night, an officer reported hearing footsteps in an empty corridor. Another officer claimed he heard someone whispering his name when nobody was nearby. Fear slowly spread through Black Ridge. Even the toughest guards became nervous. Meanwhile, Michael Turner remained calm, almost as if he already knew what was coming. Then came the discovery that changed everything. Late one evening, a maintenance worker repairing an old storage room made a shocking find. Hidden behind a loose concrete block was a small metal box. Inside were yellowed documents, maps, old prison records, and one photograph. The picture showed several prison officials standing together nearly 30 years earlier. But when Daniel looked closely, his stomach tightened. One face in the photograph looked exactly like Michael Turner. Not similar. Not close. Exactly the same. The photograph was dated 30 years ago. Michael Turner would have been a child back then. Yet there he was, standing among the adults, smiling at the camera. And written on the back of the photograph were 6 chilling words. He knows what is beneath. At that exact moment, the lights across the prison suddenly went out. Every hallway fell into darkness. And from somewhere deep below Black Ridge Penitentiary, a loud metallic banging sound began echoing through the walls. The loud metallic banging continued through the darkness. Bang, bang, bang. The sound echoed beneath Black Ridge Penitentiary like something trapped deep underground. Officer Daniel Brooks stood frozen in the storage room, still holding the old photograph. The emergency lights flickered on a few seconds later, filling the prison with a dim red glow. The banging stopped. Suddenly. Completely. The silence felt even worse. Daniel looked at the maintenance worker. The man looked terrified. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. Daniel nodded. The sound had seemed too deep to come from any prison hallway. It had come from below. Far below. Within minutes, prison officers began searching the building. They checked the cell blocks, the cafeteria, the medical wing, the workshops. Everything appeared normal. No damaged walls. No broken doors. No sign of trouble. But the feeling remained. Something was wrong. Very wrong. The next morning, Warden Richard Hayes ordered everyone to forget about the strange events. "It was probably old pipes," he said during a staff meeting. "Black Ridge is an old prison." Most officers nodded. But Daniel did not. Neither did Officer Sarah Collins. Sarah had worked at Black Ridge for nearly 10 years. She trusted facts, not rumors. But the photograph bothered her. The date on the picture was real. The prison records confirmed it. The photograph had been taken 30 years ago. Yet the man in the picture looked exactly like Michael Turner. Not older. Not younger. Exactly the same. That afternoon, Daniel and Sarah quietly began looking through old prison files. Many records were damaged. Some were missing. Others appeared to have been removed on purpose. Hours passed. Then Sarah found something unusual. A report from 29 years ago. The report described strange noises coming from beneath the prison. Missing equipment. Broken locks. And several inmates claiming they saw someone walking through restricted areas at night. Someone who was never caught on camera. The report ended suddenly. No conclusion. No explanation. Just one final sentence. Investigation closed by order of the warden. Daniel frowned. Why would they close it? Sarah shook her head. I don't know. Then she found another name. Former Warden Thomas Grayson. The man who had closed the investigation. Daniel's eyes widened. The same man appeared in the photograph with Michael Turner. Before either of them could say another word, a prison radio crackled. Officer assistance needed in cell block C. The message sounded urgent. Daniel and Sarah hurried there. Several officers stood outside a cell. Inside sat an inmate named Kevin Ross. Kevin looked pale. His hands were shaking. He kept staring at the corner of his cell. What happened? Daniel asked. One officer pointed inside. He says someone visited him last night. Daniel looked confused. Another inmate? The officer shook his head. Kevin slowly raised his head. It was Michael Turner. The room fell silent. Daniel stepped closer. Michael Turner is locked in another block. Kevin swallowed hard. Then explained how he stood right there. He pointed to the corner. I woke up and saw him watching me. Daniel stared. What did he say? Kevin's face turned white. He said the door is opening soon. A chill moved through the room. Nobody spoke. Finally, Daniel left the cell. As he walked away, he tried convincing himself it was nonsense. Maybe Kevin had dreamed it. Maybe fear was spreading through the prison. But deep down, Daniel wasn't sure. That evening, he decided to speak directly with Michael Turner. The inmate sat calmly inside cell 14 reading a book. The same calm expression rested on his face. Daniel closed the door behind him. "I have questions." Michael smiled slightly. "So do I." Daniel placed the old photograph on the table. "Who are you?" Michael glanced at the picture. His smile disappeared. For the first time, he seemed uncomfortable. "You shouldn't have found that." Daniel leaned forward. "Answer me." Michael remained silent for several seconds. Then he spoke softly. "My family has known about this prison for generations." "What does that mean?" "It means some secrets should stay buried." Daniel's patience was running out. "What is beneath Black Ridge?" Michael looked directly into his eyes. Before answering, he glanced toward the floor, toward the concrete beneath their feet. Then he whispered 4 words. "They never sealed it." Daniel felt a knot form in his stomach. What wasn't sealed? But Michael refused to answer. The interview ended. Daniel left more confused than ever. That night, a powerful storm arrived. Rain slammed against the prison walls. Thunder shook the building. Most inmates stayed quiet. Many officers remained nervous. Around midnight, Daniel sat in the security room reviewing old camera footage. Hours passed. Nothing unusual appeared. Then one monitor flickered. Daniel leaned forward. A hallway camera had activated by itself. The corridor was empty. At first. Then a figure appeared. Someone was walking through a restricted tunnel beneath the prison. The image was blurry. The person moved slowly, step by step. The camera zoomed automatically. Daniel's heart began racing. The figure looked exactly like Michael Turner. But that was impossible. Michael was locked inside cell 14. Daniel immediately called another officer. Together they rushed to cell 14. The door remained locked. The security seal was untouched. Daniel unlocked the viewing slot. Michael Turner was still inside, sleeping on his bed, exactly where he should be. Daniel turned pale, because the person on the tunnel camera was still walking, still moving, still heading deeper underground. And then the figure suddenly stopped, slowly turned toward the camera, and smiled. At the exact same moment, every light inside Black Ridge Prison went dark once again. And from somewhere beneath the prison came a deafening crash that shook the entire building. The deafening crash shook Black Ridge Penitentiary from top to bottom. Lights burst. Dust fell from the ceiling. Prisoners jumped from their beds. Officers grabbed walls to keep their balance. For several seconds, it felt like the entire prison might collapse. Then everything became still. Darkness covered every hallway. The only sounds were distant shouts and the steady rain beating against the prison walls. Officer Daniel Brooks grabbed his flashlight and ran. Other guards joined him. Emergency lights slowly flickered back to life, painting the prison in an eerie red glow. The crash had come from below. Everyone knew it. Warden Richard Hayes quickly ordered a full inspection. "No one goes underground," he said firmly. "Seal every access door." But Daniel noticed something strange. The warden looked nervous. Not surprised. Nervous. Almost as if he already knew what had happened. The thought stayed with Daniel as teams searched the prison. A few hours later, maintenance workers discovered the source of the crash. An old section of concrete beneath the eastern wing had collapsed. Behind it was something nobody expected. A hidden staircase. The staircase descended into darkness. Deep darkness. The steps were covered in decades of dust. Nobody had officially known it existed. Yet somehow it had been built beneath the prison. The discovery shocked everyone. The warden immediately ordered the area sealed. Again. No investigation. No explanation. Daniel and Sarah exchanged looks. Something wasn't right. That afternoon, they secretly returned to the hidden staircase. The area was empty. Most officers had moved back to their normal duties. Daniel shined his flashlight downward. The staircase seemed endless. "What do you think is down there?" Sarah asked quietly. Daniel shook his head. "I don't know." But he intended to find out. That night, Long after most staff had gone home, Daniel and Sarah returned. The prison was unusually quiet. Even the inmates seemed calmer than normal, as if they were waiting for something. The two officers slipped through the restricted area and entered the hidden staircase. The air immediately felt colder. Each step creaked beneath their feet. Dust covered everything. The deeper they went, the older the structure appeared. After several minutes, they reached the bottom. A narrow tunnel stretched ahead. The walls were stone instead of concrete. This part had existed long before the prison. Daniel's flashlight revealed rusted metal doors lining both sides. Some hung open. Others remained shut. None had labels. None appeared on prison blueprints. Sarah examined the walls. Someone had scratched symbols into the stone. Hundreds of them. The same symbol repeated again and again. A circle with a line through its center. Daniel remembered seeing that symbol somewhere before. Then it hit him. The old photograph. The symbol had been faintly visible on the back. A chill ran through him. As they continued walking, they found something else. Old documents. Boxes. Broken furniture. Records covered in dust. Many appeared decades old. Daniel opened one box. Inside were prisoner files. Dozens of them. Some dated back over 30 years. He flipped through the papers. Most names meant nothing to him. Then he stopped. One file carried a familiar name. Michael Turner. Daniel's eyes widened. The file was dated 28 years ago. That made no sense. Michael would have been a child. Yet the file described him as an adult inmate. The attached photograph showed the same face. The same age. The same man. Daniel felt his pulse quicken. This can't be real. Sarah looked over his shoulder. Neither knew what to say. Then they heard footsteps. Slow footsteps. Coming from deeper inside the tunnel. The two officers immediately switched off their flashlights. Darkness swallowed them. The footsteps continued. Step, step, step. Someone was approaching. Daniel held his breath. The figure emerged from the shadows. For a brief moment, illuminated by a weak emergency light hanging from the ceiling, Daniel saw the face. It was Michael Turner. Or at least it looked exactly like him. The figure continued walking. Without noticing them. Without speaking. Without making a sound other than footsteps. Daniel stepped forward. Michael! The figure instantly stopped. Everything became silent. Then the figure slowly turned its head. Its eyes met Daniel's. A faint smile appeared. And then it ran. Fast. Far faster than Daniel expected. Daniel and Sarah chased after it. The tunnel twisted through the darkness. Left. Right. Left again. The figure remained just ahead. Always visible. Always out of reach. Finally, it disappeared through a large steel doorway. Daniel reached the doorway seconds later. He pushed inside. The room beyond was enormous. Bigger than any room beneath the prison should have been. Rows of shelves stretched into darkness. Old files covered every wall. Thousands of records. Thousands. Sarah stepped beside him. What is this place? Before Daniel could answer, his flashlight landed on a massive board mounted at the far end of the room. Photographs covered it. Hundreds of photographs. Prisoners. Officers. Wardens. Maintenance workers. Decades of people connected to Black Ridge. And in every single photograph, no matter the year, no matter the decade, one face appeared again and again. The face of Michael Turner. The same age. The same smile. The same eyes. Daniel stared in disbelief. Then his flashlight moved lower. Beneath the photographs was a list of names. Every name had a date beside it. Most names were crossed out. But one name at the very bottom was freshly written. Officer Daniel Brooks. And next to his name was tomorrow's date. At that exact moment, the steel door behind them slammed shut. The steel door slammed shut with a thunderous boom. Daniel and Sarah spun around. The sound echoed through the enormous underground room. Daniel rushed to the door and grabbed the handle. It would not move. He pulled harder. Nothing. The door was locked. Sarah immediately searched the walls for a switch or control panel. There was none. For a moment, neither officer spoke. The only sound was their breathing. Then Daniel looked back at the giant board. His own name was still there, written in fresh ink. Officer Daniel Brooks. Tomorrow's date. A cold feeling spread through his chest. Who had written it? And why? Sarah stepped closer to the board. There must be an explanation. Daniel wanted to believe that. But the deeper they went into Black Ridge, the fewer explanations existed. They began searching the room. The shelves held thousands of files. Some were falling apart with age. Others looked surprisingly new. One shelf contained records of prison employees dating back decades. Another held inmate reports. A third contained newspaper clippings. Daniel pulled out one folder after another. Each one seemed stranger than the last. Then Sarah found something important. A leather journal. Very old. The cover was cracked and faded. Inside, a name was written. Warden Thomas Grayson. The same warden from the old photograph. The same man who had shut down the investigation nearly 30 years ago. Daniel opened the journal. The handwriting was messy but readable. Most entries described normal prison business. Repairs. Transfers. Staff problems. Then the journal changed. The entries became darker. More fearful. One page caught Daniel's attention. He read it aloud. Something is living in the tunnels beneath Black Ridge. We thought it was a man. We were wrong. Sarah looked up. What does that mean? Daniel continued reading. The thing copies people. It learns them. It watches them. Once it chooses someone, it follows them forever. A chill ran through both officers. Daniel turned another page. The prisoners call it the Watcher. The room suddenly felt colder. Several more pages were missing. Ripped out. The next remaining entry was dated 6 months later. Daniel read silently. Then his face turned pale. Sarah noticed immediately. What is it? Daniel handed her the journal. She read the final sentence. We sealed the lower tunnels, but I fear it is already inside the prison. Neither officer spoke. The silence felt heavy. Then a distant sound echoed through the room. Footsteps. Slow. Steady. Getting closer. Daniel shut the journal. The footsteps continued. Step, step, step. Coming from somewhere beyond the shelves. Sarah grabbed her flashlight tighter. Someone's here. Daniel nodded. Together they moved carefully between the rows of files. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then another sound. A whisper. Very soft. Almost impossible to hear. Daniel froze. The whisper sounded familiar. It sounded like his own voice. His heart began racing. The whisper came again. This time from the next aisle. Daniel quickly turned the corner. Nobody was there. Only shelves. Dust. And darkness. Then Sarah gasped. Daniel rushed back toward her. She was staring at one of the shelves. A photograph lay on the floor. It had not been there moments earlier. Daniel picked it up. His stomach tightened. The photograph showed him standing outside Black Ridge Prison. The picture appeared recent. Maybe a week old. But Daniel had never seen anyone take it. On the back was a message. I know where you live. Sarah looked disturbed. This isn't funny anymore. Daniel agreed. Someone had been watching him. For how long? Days. Months. Years. Suddenly, the lights overhead flickered. Once. Twice. 3 times. Then a voice echoed through the room. Daniel. The voice sounded exactly like Sarah. Daniel turned toward her. But Sarah hadn't spoken. Her face showed the same confusion. Then the voice came again. Daniel. This time it came from deeper inside the underground complex. The officers followed it cautiously. The voice continued calling his name. Always ahead. Always just out of reach. Finally, they entered a long corridor. At the far end stood a single figure. Motionless. Watching them. The distance made details hard to see. But Daniel already knew who it looked like. Michael Turner. The figure slowly raised one hand, then pointed toward a nearby doorway. After that, it stepped backward into darkness and vanished. Daniel and Sarah exchanged nervous looks. After a brief hesitation, they approached the doorway. The room beyond looked different from the others. Cleaner. Less abandoned. As if someone had been using it recently. A desk sat in the center. Several modern computers stood against one wall. Fresh coffee rested beside one monitor. Someone had been there very recently. Daniel switched on one computer. The screen lit up. Files appeared immediately. No password required. The first folder contained surveillance footage. Thousands of videos. The second folder held photographs. Thousands more. Every corner of the prison. Every hallway. Every office. Every employee. Someone had been secretly watching Black Ridge for years. Then Sarah opened another folder. Her eyes widened. Daniel, you need to see this. Daniel stepped closer. The folder contained personnel records. Current staff. Former staff. Wardens. Officers. Everyone. Each file included photographs and notes. Next to some names was a single word. Observed. Next to others was another word. Replaced. Daniel felt his blood run cold. He scrolled through the list. More names. More records. More photographs. Then he found someone he recognized. Warden Richard Hayes. Beside the warden's name was one word. Replaced. Before Daniel could process what that meant, a hidden speaker somewhere in the room suddenly crackled to life. A man's voice filled the air. Calm, clear, and terrifyingly familiar. It was Michael Turner's voice. You're finally close to the truth. The computer screens instantly changed. Every monitor displayed the same live camera feed. The feed showed Warden Hayes standing alone in his office upstairs. But then another person entered the room behind him. A person with Michael Turner's face. The figure slowly smiled. And before the camera feed cut to black, Daniel watched in horror as the warden turned around. And revealed that he also had Michael Turner's face. Here is the final chapter that resolves the mystery while keeping the story grounded as a crime thriller rather than supernatural. Daniel stared at the black computer screen. For several seconds, neither he nor Sarah spoke. The image they had just seen made no sense. Two people. The same face. The same smile. The same eyes. It felt impossible. Then the speaker crackled again. Michael Turner's voice filled the room. The truth is waiting upstairs. The speaker went silent. Daniel looked at Sarah. We need answers. Together, they rushed out of the underground room. They followed the tunnels back toward the hidden staircase. As they climbed, Daniel's mind raced. The old photographs. The secret files. The hidden surveillance system. The repeated appearance of Michael Turner over decades. There had to be a real explanation. And he intended to find it. Minutes later, they reached the prison administration wing. The hallways were strangely quiet. Most officers had been sent to inspect the damaged areas caused by the collapse. Daniel and Sarah hurried toward the warden's office. The door stood slightly open. Daniel pushed it carefully. Inside, Warden Richard Hayes sat behind his desk. Alone. Looking exhausted. The moment he saw Daniel, he lowered his head. Almost as if he knew this day would come. You found the tunnels, the warden said quietly. Daniel stepped forward. Tell me the truth. The warden looked at Sarah. Then back at Daniel. Finally, he nodded. It's over. 4 years, Richard Hayes had protected a secret hidden beneath Black Ridge. Not because he wanted to. Because he was afraid. Decades earlier, Black Ridge had been built on top of an abandoned government research site. The project had never been made public. A small group of officials had secretly tested advanced facial disguise technology. The technology could completely change a person's appearance. The goal had been to help undercover investigators fight organized crime. But the project failed. Criminal groups learned about it. Some of the technology disappeared. Several researchers vanished. The government shut everything down. Or at least they thought they had. Years later, a criminal organization discovered the abandoned underground facility. Using stolen research, they built a network beneath Black Ridge. They used hidden tunnels to move information, money, and people. Anyone who got too close was silenced or paid to stay quiet. Then came Michael Turner. His real name wasn't Michael Turner. The man had used many identities over the years. He was one of the leaders of the organization. The reason his face appeared in photographs from different decades was simple. Whenever one member grew old or was arrested, another member underwent the same facial transformation. To outsiders, it looked like the same man never aged. The legend of Michael Turner was intentionally created. A perfect disguise. A perfect ghost. Daniel finally understood. The mystery had never been supernatural. It had been one of the most carefully planned criminal operations imaginable. Sarah crossed her arms. Then why surrender? Why come back here? The warden sighed. Because the organization was falling apart. Michael Turner had returned to Black Ridge for a reason. Someone inside the group had betrayed the others. Millions of dollars had disappeared. Secret records had been stolen. Trust was gone. Michael wanted to recover the missing information before federal investigators found it. But something had gone wrong. Very wrong. At that moment, alarms suddenly erupted across the prison. Daniel's radio crackled. "Officer Brooks, cell 14 is empty." Daniel froze. Sarah looked at him. The two officers immediately ran. They raced through the hallways toward cell 14. When they arrived, several guards stood outside. The door remained locked. The security seals were untouched. Just as before. Inside, the cell was empty. Michael Turner had vanished. Again. But this time Daniel noticed something. A small crack behind the metal bed frame. Maintenance workers quickly pulled the bed aside. Hidden behind it was a narrow access panel. The panel led into an old ventilation route connected to the underground tunnels. Michael had never magically disappeared. He had escaped through a secret passage known only to the organization. The mystery of the locked cell was finally solved. Federal agents arrived before sunrise. The hidden tunnels were secured. The underground surveillance rooms were seized. Thousands of secret documents were recovered. Dozens of arrests followed across several states. The criminal organization that had operated beneath Black Ridge for decades finally collapsed. Weeks later, Daniel stood outside the prison fence. The desert wind moved quietly across the empty landscape. News reporters called it one of the strangest criminal cases in American prison history. A prisoner had vanished from a locked cell. A secret network had hidden beneath a prison for decades. An entire criminal organization had built a legend around a single face. Most of the people responsible were now behind bars. Daniel looked toward the horizon. One question still remained. Michael Turner had escaped. Despite the arrests. Despite the investigation. Despite everything. No one knew where he had gone. No one had seen him since. As Daniel turned to leave, a black sedan drove past on the distant highway. For a brief moment, sunlight reflected off the driver's window. Daniel caught a glimpse of the driver. A man with short brown hair. A calm smile. And a face he would never forget. The car continued down the road. Growing smaller. Then disappearing into the desert. Michael Turner was gone. But somewhere out there, he was still free. And nobody knew when he might return.